Today we're going into Psalms 46. It's a very interesting psalm. Once again, we're dealing with God is our refuge and strength and a present help in trouble. And the idea that we can look to him for strength in time of trouble. He does care. And therefore will not we fear, though the mountains be moved, and though the earth be moved, and the mountains be carried out in the midst of the sea. If we see this great tumult going along, where mountains are being moved and into the sea, and all this stuff, will we give in to fear? See, these days are the days of fear, and we need to be careful how we're dealing with fear, how we rightly understand fear. The Christian is not a person who has no fear. A Christian is someone who understands the motivations of that fear. And is that fear caution, or is that fear unrealistic? So we have to look at those things and see, are we being afraid because God won't do it? Are we being concerned because we are in a place that needs some concern? We're not to be people of no fear. We're to use emotions for the glory of God. And so there's nothing wrong with being angry, but in your anger, sin not. Nothing wrong with some lust. In your marriage, you're going to need some lust to keep things moving, to keep the fires burning in a good sort of way. So emotions are not evil or good. They are tools to be used by God for his glory. So we see that we're dealing with fear here. And it seems like we deal with fear, or we deal with caution. We're dealing with nations raging. We're dealing with enemies. We're dealing with feeling like we're caught in traps. Who can't relate to any of this? And yet he says, therefore will not we fear, though the earth be moved, though the waters therefore roar with troubles, though the mountains shall shake. There is a river of streams that will make glad the city of God, the holy place of his tabernacles. That going to the city of God, and again, where is our city of God? Our city of God is in heaven. At this point, he was creating the city of God so that the people would not fear. They would have a place to run, and they would have a God to run to. The heathens rage, and the kingdoms are moved. He, which is God, utters his voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. The term Lord of hosts, this is like the captain of the army. He's with us. He's on our side. So we forget that Jesus isn't just standing there alone or sitting there alone in heaven. He's got a multitude of angels that he's willing to put forth for protection. Many of times in our own physical lives here, that the men go to war, the women and children don't go. We don't send our young children to war. And here is the same thing. There is a Lord of hosts who will take care of and do the hard work for us. And he goes, he maketh wars to cease. I mean, you have to have pretty powerful to make wars cease. Wars don't just cease from diplomacy or two people willing to get along. Sometimes there's an overriding force that says, no, you will not war. The very, again, verse 10, be still and know that I am God. You've heard that 1,000 times, so have I. It's a very good one to go to. When fear is running rampant, there is scriptures in the New Testament where it says people's hearts will fail them because of fear. Fear will become so great that people's hearts will fail them. We don't know that type of fear yet, but that fear could be on the horizon. We need to prepare for that. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the heathens. I will exalt myself. You don't have to run around exalting me. I will exalt myself. The Lord of hosts is with us. Once again, the Lord of hosts. Word of hosts is, again, a military term. The captain of the military is with us. So there's a lot of comfort in 46. When 9/11 happened, our pastor used 46 as a time of fear, and people were unsure of what was going to happen next. And he used that this chapter, that he is our refuge and strength in very present help. He is a present help. He's not a future help. He's not somebody who helped in the past and we hope he comes back and does it again. He is present help right now. So it's a very good psalm. Starting Leviticus today. And remember that the Torah was written, all 5 books. They were broken into pieces, but they're one big story that goes all the way to the end. And they're just a 5-book story. Here, we've seen in Exodus a laying of the foundation of what God wanted. Now from here, we're going to see extrapolations. We're going to see how it works out, how you're supposed to take this. Now that you have this Ark of the Covenant, now you have this tabernacle, now you've got the courtyards, now you've got the priest, now you've got what they're now we're going to find out how they are supposed to minister. So the word Leviticus could easily be turned up in the word how. This is the how book. Don't just glaze through these books as well. It's part of the Bible. I just have to read it and get it out of the way. Stop and look at what it's really saying. Stop and look the inferences, the implications, the connections. Everything here is connected. When my sons used to make these very intricate things out of Legos, there wasn't a piece left over. The guys who make Legos, all the pieces were there to be fit to make what you're supposed to make. All these pieces are here. The Bible says that not one jot or one tittle until it's all fulfilled. It's meant to be used, every part of it. When God repeats himself, he's repeating himself for clarity. Read the repeat. Hear it that he reiterates this. There isn't a, well, just do it like you did last time, or remember how you did this? Just do it that way. He repeats himself again and again, and you can see that. You'll start seeing patterns. He talks about, taking away the caul above the liver. He talks about taking away the kidneys. He talks about taking away the fat and burning it. And he mentions that again and again just to remind them that when you're doing specific sacrifices, even though you're doing similarly, don't forget these intricacies. It's a part of the recipe, if you will, for how he wants this done. And so when he's scheduling this how, it's very simple, very basic. So you don't do a sin offering and forget to take out the caul and the kidneys and the liver and the fat and remove it and burn it outside the camp. That you don't remember to do the blood sacrifice outside the tent of the congregation. There is a sense of clarity that we need to see with this God. He's a very clear God. Our problem is we get in a big hurry. There's a lot to be seen here, and I'm going to just touch the top of it. But we finished off with the establishment of the tabernacle and the glory of God in Exodus. Then we can turn the page, and here we go. We're keeping moving. And Lord called to Moses and spoke to him out of the tabernacle of the congregation. The God has moved in. He's moved in. He's not calling him from Sinai or from some mountain or from some temporary tabernacle that was set up in a time of emergency. Now everything's set up, everything's functioning. Now let me tell you how we're going to do it and what you're going to do. And we're dealing basically what we're going to find, and we're going to see this repeated again and again, is there's an establishment of four offerings. You have the burnt offering, and then we're going to get to the meat offerings, peace offering, sin offering. And you're going to see that these four will then be used in certain ways because of certain sins and because of certain things. You'll grab one of these four and make an offering to God, and you do it very specifically. And there's a specificity to Leviticus and later on, and even in Numbers, that he's very specific on how you do these four offerings for, like, if the common man sins, or if the ruler sins, or if a person sins unknowingly. There's different situations that you use these for. So we're learning how to do these four. We're going to cover at least 3 of these 4 today. And so he begins talking about the burnt offering. And again, he's just not pulling one out of his hat. You have a burnt offering before you have a meat offering, and then you have a peace offering, and then you have a sin offering. So you've got to make sure that we're going to do first. The burnt offering is, we'll see, it's totally given to God. This one is just 100%. You're taking care of the offering. You're setting it out. There's no leaven on it. I'll look at that in a minute. And then we burn the whole thing, 100%. The second one is a meat offering, where part of it goes to God, but part of it is eaten by the priest. And so it's a fellowship offering, like koinonia. Remember when the 70 elders met to establish their part of the covenant? Well, they had a little fellowship offering. Here, the priests are constantly in a fellowship offering with God. You have a peace offering where we are at peace. Once again, people at war, you've established a certain amount of peace, and now you're at peace with God. Then you have the sin offering. Now let's take care of the sin. Get rid of the sin, the problem. Get rid of the transgression. And we're going to see a lot of sin offerings repeated, and these are going to be very similarly, but they also have their distinctives. It's important that we remember the distinctives. This is why you'll see it going over when you're reading these books. It feels like you can go pretty fast. You're kind of reading the same words again and again. I remember reading in, I think it was Numbers, where they go through a whole chapter of this person brought this, and they brought this many wagons and this many horses and this many, and it's the same numbers, maybe subtracted one as they're going. It's something to work through. Don't just glaze over it. We're not in a foot race to the cross. As an empirical Christian, we're stopping and looking at the evidence. We're not making emotional choices, and we're stopping to look at the evidence of what we're seeing and how the specifics and what are the differences, what are the similarities, how do they all fit together. One of the things that I've been guiding this whole study for is the idea of, again, a forensic scientist who's looking over a murder scene, or something like that. We've all seen the mystery shows. You don't rush the data. You don't rush what you're looking at. You take your time some of them will create a grid work, and then they'll carefully go through each grid to see well, we got 66 grids here to go through. And we'll make we can't help but make some kinds of hypothesis as we're going. And there's some things that might be static and that are settled as you're going. Okay, fine. Many of that, but we have to be very careful that all the conclusions we make are made from the evidence, not from emotions, or not from some hypothesis that has been postulated, or not from somebody else's conclusions, not from an assumption made. Oh, that footprint came from a man. It might have been from a woman in a man's shoe. I mean, be careful dealing with evidence, and deal with this evidence carefully. And even though it might seem mundane, be an evidentiary. You're not in a big hurry. We're not in a foot race. So beginning today, we're going to be looking at the burnt offerings, the meat offerings, and the peace offerings. Tomorrow we'll work on the sin offering, which I found very important. But there's so much there, I don't think I can adequately cover sin offering with this, because it's a much bigger thing. But the burnt offering, once again, he talks about bringing a bullock, and he mentions bullocks, again, oxen, a beast of burden. Who is a beast of burden? Who is the one who bore our burden? The ox has always been a symbol of Christ. He came to be a servant of man, to be that. So you'll kill the bullock before Yahweh, and the sons and Aaron's sons shall bring the blood and sprinkle the blood round about the altar. That is by the door of the tabernacle. So we're outside of the tabernacle. We're not inside. We don't take blood into the tabernacle. You're outside of the tabernacle. And you shall flay the burnt offering in pieces, and the sons of Aaron, the priest, shall put it with fire, and lay the wood upon the fire. And they shall lay the parts, the head and the fat, in order upon the wood, but the inwards and the legs shall he wash with water. You're going to make a clean burnt offering, which you might say, well, what's the point? It's going to be burnt. God demands a clean offering. And so you're going to clean the offering, and you'll burn it on the altar. And this says it's a sweet savor unto the Lord. There's a sweetness to this. There is something that when we obey God, he's pleased. We're pleasing him. A sweet savor, a sweet smell always is pleasing. Whether you're dealing with flowers or whether you're dealing with someone cooking or something, you're dealing with aromas can be very pleasing. And it is his offering. If your offerings of the flocks, you'll bring a male without blemish. You're dealing with a male without blemish. You'll kill it on the north side. You'll cut it into pieces. You'll wash the inwards, and the burnt offerings for his offering of the fowl, if you're bringing fowl, if you bring turtle doves or pigeons, you'll wring the neck, you'll pluck the crop, and you'll burn it upon the altar. Now, all of that was pretty simple. We did that in, how many verses was that? 17 verses to cover the burnt offering. It's pretty simple. Whatever you're doing as a burnt offering, 100%, you clean it, and then you burn it and give it to God. We're dealing with the meat offerings, and this is, again, a fellowship offering where they're going to put on, now you're adding frankincenses. Now you're adding different aromas. You're adding oils. You're adding a handful of flour. I mean, you can almost see the baking. You almost hear the sizzle. Reading chapter 2 kind of made me hungry, because you're making basically a steak dinner in a sense, because you're cooking up this meat. And you make this burnt offering. make this meat offering, and the remnant of the meat offering shall be for Aaron's and his sons. So Aaron and his sons get to participate. Now, you're like, well, what about the rest of the people? Are they standing around with plates? This is actually meant to be an example of giving to God of the bounty that he is already creating for the people. He's already creating bounty. If this had worked the way God wanted it, they would have been a secure nation with their enemies afraid of them, with milk and honey, with all kinds of cattle, with all kinds of sheep. They would have had a strong economy. They would have been led by the shekel of the tabernacle, and they would have had their bills forgiven every 50 years. People would have lived in family units where they were always trading lands within that family unit. It would have been stable. You wouldn't have had to fight for other people's lands. When people died, you just inherited, took over, worked with part of the land. And there was plenty of land. God had this all planned out. Man is the one that messes it up. But here, this is good. He is participating with man in the goodness that he is giving man. Men are not outside with plates wanting to get in. They're supposed to be eating plates. There's a time of Hezekiah and a time in Solomon where the people rejoiced and had their meat. They had their wines. The king made sure that that there was meat for the people, and wine and grain, and people were eating well and living well. So this is not meant to be us first and you second. This is an example of the bounty that God is providing, wants to provide for the people. So here he is participating. God is participating in this. And all these other gods are hanging around in heaven, or they're hanging around behind, in a temple somewhere. Here he's out participating with them. And they bring that in, and you'll offer a meat offering of these things unto the Lord, and you present it, and he shall bring it to the altar. And they're taking this meat offering, and it says that the priest shall take the meat offering, a memorial, and burn it on the altar. It's an offering made by fire, a sweet savor unto the Lord, and that which is left shall be for Aaron's and his sons. Again, a participatory fellowship offering. There's no mention of sin in here, by the way. There's no mention of, we get to that later when we get to the sin offering, but this offering is, we're not dealing with sin here. We're dealing with just participation, just koinonia, just, and they talk about later, an oblation of the first fruits. You shall offer them unto the Lord, and they shall not be burnt on the altar with a sweet savor. And every oblation of thy meat offering shall thou season with salt. You get to put salt on your meat, guys. And there shall not be a lack of salt for it. And it also says that you'll also have green ears of fried corn, fried by the fire, even corn beaten out of the full ears. So you get corn and meat with salt. I mean, this is a great fellowship meal. And the priest shall burn, and thou shalt put oil on it, frankincense, as a meat offering. And the priest shall burn the memorial of it, part of the beaten corn, and oil thereof, and the frankincense made by fire. So again, you're making this meat offering. God's gets burnt, and the priest and Aaron get to participate. Now, we are called, the ambassadors of God. He wants to make us kings and priests. We also can have fellowship with Christ in a meat offering, in our lives. So not everything is about sin. Not everything is about, well, I messed up. Sometimes it's just koinonia, just connection. But here, this is a very wonderful chapter because it's not dealing with sin. It's not dealing with, you've made me mad and here's what you need to do. It's a sit-down meal. Chapter 3 is we go through the peace offerings. And once again, you're going to see these offerings coming up again and again. If his oblation is a sacrifice of a peace offering, is offered from the herd, male or female, he has offered it without blemish. Sometimes they'll use just males without blemish. I've noticed other places they will use a female without blemish. There's a reason why. See, these technicalities are important. We shouldn't glean them over. There's a reason why. I'm not going to go into all the reasonings. We'd be here for a long time. But when you're going through, notice the differences. I was marking in my Bible the differences that we're going to see of procedure. But the procedures are important. They're similar in some places. In some places you do a certain thing. In some places you don't do a certain thing. And it's very important why you're not doing something the same way every time, why there's a different routine that needs to be learned. They're similar, but they're different. There's sometimes that you'll flick your finger towards the altar. Sometimes you don't, So what's the difference? Is there a difference? Well, there is. But in the peace offering, and there's a sense of also one thing I wanted to say, is this whole laying on of hands. You'll hear this a lot. You'll lay your hands on something. When you lay your hands on something, it's like you're saying, this is me. This is me. I'm on the altar. I'm dying. I'm shedding my blood because of my sin. You won't have a laying on of hands for the meat offerings. When they offer the meat offerings, it's just a meat offering. But you'll find where the priest will lay on of hands to kill, and in that situation saying, this is us, this is me. Or later on, when in the sin offering, when people bring a bullock, that person will lay their hand on the head of the animal and kind of ceremonial will say, this is me, and then kill the bullock. The blood will be spent. This is me, dying because of sin. Now, that was all a typology of the great sin sacrifice that would be made in Jesus. But here, the common sinner participated in that ritual to understand that blood was connected to sin and forgiveness, and that they themselves would have to kill the lamb or kill the bullock. And then the priest would pick it up after that. So, and so we see this, the laying on of hands. You'll see this every time you see laying on of hands. In our churches, when they come up to lay on of hands, if you're sending a missionary into the field, you're saying, you're me. It's very tragic that a lot of people will lay on of hands and then not care. I'm very careful about who I lay hands on because I feel that connection. You're me now. I'm going to take care of you. Call me if you need help. Let's get together. You're now a part of me. And so be careful who you lay hands on, because God sees that symbolism, and then we walk away and not care, or we're not consistent in our support, or, that's not what laying hands is supposed to be. So you'll see that there's a laying on of hands, that they take away the fat that's in the peace offering. You're taking away the fat and the 2 kidneys and the fat that is with them by the flanks and the caul by the liver you take away. Now in the burnt offerings, you burnt everything. And in the meat offerings, you took the meat and you used it in fellowship offering. Here, you're removing the toxins from the peace offering. You're moving the stuff that where the toxins are held. And you get rid of that and you burn it, because this is to keep disease out of the camp. And they'll offer this as a burnt offering on fire, made with wood on fire, as a sweet savor. And this offering is and if it's offering is a sacrifice of a peace offering, you should offer a male or female and offer it. Or if you offer a lamb, you'll lay your hands upon it. And you can offer this sacrifice as an offering made unto the Lord. You remove the dangerous parts, the toxic parts, and you offer this to God. You're offering clean to God, not toxins. This is not a fellowship offering where you're eating the meat. And these offerings can be made. I want to offer a peace offering to the Lord. Okay, here's how we're going to do it. Only the priest participated in this meat offerings, by the way. Once again, you're going to see these different offerings are for different people at different times. Not just anyone could do a meat offering unto God. This was specifically for the priest. The priest did the burnt offerings to God. Once again, they did the burnt offerings, not your average person. They were the only ones that were anointed, consecrated, called to do these offerings. No one else could just walk in there or do a burnt offering in your backyard or something. That's specifically at the temple. Meat offerings specifically for the priest, for Aaron and his sons, and later we'll see the Levitical priest will be invited into this. And again, by inference, when he was going to go with the firstborn, that would be that person representing, as if the whole family of his was there. So when Levi is there, that's like representing all 12 tribes are there. There is a sort of representation to vicarious. In other words, a vicarious sacrifice is you not doing it, someone else is doing it on your behalf. This is almost representative government. It's representative. The elders, the 70 elders represented all of Israel. And so now the priest represents all of Israel. His sons will represent, and then of course you're going to have the Levites representing. So it's all representation of all of Israel, as if all of Israel was doing this. So he takes the caul and the kidney, you take it away, and this person does a peace offering, and the priest shall burn it on, and it is the food of the offering made with a sweet savor, and it shall be a perpetual statute for your generations through all your dwellings, that you eat neither fat nor blood. They are not allowed to eat fat or blood. That is where the toxins, of course, are kept. That is dangerous. But the blood is for the sacrifice. The blood is also the life of the animal is in the blood. So we see, covering these three offerings, they're important, they're distinctive, they're not just anyone doing them, and he wants us to do peace offerings. I'm at peace with God. I want to do a peace offering. Okay, you should be. We should be having people in happiness and holiness, having a peace offering to God where it's not all about I'm sorry, but now I'm thankful that we're at peace. And so, again, we see there are specific reasons why he has these offerings, and all four of them will be a template, like I've said, and they will be used at different times for different reasons, for the glory of God, for people to stay in communion, stay in koinonia, to stay in a state of grace with their God through the shed blood of lambs, through the bullock that represents Christ, and to have these offerings. So you're going to see this come back again and again. It might seem a little bit tedious here today to touch these bases, but it's going to get stated again and again for the next. There's 27 chapters in Leviticus. We covered 3. That's 24 chapters. Hang on. Don't fast forward. Don't run through these books. Where we are evidentiary Christians, not conclusionary. I've already drawn a conclusion. It's like wading through the dry parts of a movie. There are no dry parts of the movie here. If you want to see something of God, it's here. If you don't want to, you'll glaze over. But he is in the distinctives and he is in the details. Thank you.